The Texans just lost by 5 points to a potential Super Bowl contender. You would think the sky is falling based off the fan reaction. We're here to tell you why it both is and isn't on this edition of The Bullpen.
To throw the punches off. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Touchdown for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to The Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is Tom Chaparria. Tom, how are you doing today?
It's been a tough day to be a Houston sports fan. Normally the way these things work, my Astros are going to lose, my Texans are going to win. My Texans are going to lose, my Astros are going to win. Today we got neither, and it's just all bad. But I mean,
yeah, that was not my favorite thing to see, especially with the Astros being down in the Silver Boot series right now. They only have so much more room for error before that's something that my brother-in-law is going to talk to me about. So as much as it's not the most important thing the Astros are doing this year, I'd like to see them wake up and figure it out. But yeah, not a great day. I was at the game, so I sat in the heat for several hours just to be disappointed. And it's one of those things where I like to let my team do the talking. So there was I was around Rams fans that are the kind of people that will celebrate at you when they see that you get excited about your team doing something good and their team does something good later. So I like to let the Texans do the talking, and I was really hopeful that they would come through, and it looked like they might, so that I could subtly look back and kind of go, there you go. That's how it goes. My team won, yours didn't. So welcome to the NFL, I guess. But didn't get to do that because the Texans lost 14-9, and not a lot of good things to take away from this. Now, my immediate thoughts on this are very optimistic, at least. I was a little more, I was wallowing a little more after this one because I was there. So it's always a little more frustrating to pay the money to see your team lose. But overall, as many flaws as there are, I'm kind of in the glass half full camp. Just to start things out, Tom, let's set the tone. Where is your head at after watching this Texans game?
So I have not given up on the season. I still feel like there's a lot that the Texans can achieve, and who knows? They can correct some things that I saw today. My fear, if there is a fear, is that I saw some things today that I saw last year that we hoped were not going to be an issue this year that are still clearly an issue. And I feel like the good teams figure that stuff out. The great teams get rid of it altogether, and you don't see them make the same mistake twice. It's one game, but today I saw a lot of the similar situations, that we thought were corrected in the offseason. And I just don't know if it's a systemic thing that, we're always going to have to be judged by, and maybe they just have to outscore those issues. Cause in the end, if they put up enough points, they probably would have won the game today. The fact that they weren't able to score today is probably the reason why they lost. The defense did their job. 14 points is a number that as an offense, you feel like you should be able to give your team. It's just how they lost that I'm concerned with, and the issues that made the game the way it was, that have made other games that way. And their ability to stop guys in certain ways are things that you correct over time or you don't. And so far, I don't feel like they've corrected them enough.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And so with that, moving into this discussion, I'd like to start with there were some things with the defense that I saw. So it's not all offense, but I think that the most important discussion to have here is on the offense, since that's kind of where the majority of the issue lies. When a team only allows 14 points, they should win. That is, especially a team that comes into the season, whether you believe it or not, I think a lot of the feel going into the season was that the Texans were ready to take the next step to be a contender. And so it is concerning that there was no progress there. But I think there's some things we can talk about that kind of should temper expectations. Now, that being said, I personally think that we have till the bye week, maybe a little after that, before we can establish our thoughts on what this Texans team should do this season based off like actually seeing them play. And that's the big thing. I bet people will be like, "Well, I saw in the preseason, I saw in the training camp." It's like those are not real football. So this is a team that's young and, in a lot of areas, a rookie tackle who was playing left tackle for 4 weeks and got shifted to right tackle right before the game started. There's a lot of things. We'll get into it. But first thing I want to talk about is Nick Caley. So I think a lot of people, I would compare him to Arch Manning, maybe not to the same level, because I do think that ironically enough, considering both of us are Texas fans, but you were skeptical of Nick Caley, and I think rightfully so, because he was hired on, has a lot of similar history to Bobby Slowick, is a new play caller, and so I think your expectations in that regard were tempered correctly. And so I think that while we saw some things that are indicative of a continued trend, I think the first thing we have to look at is that Nick Caley is running a new offense, implementing a new scheme, and it's going to take some time. So what are some things that you saw specifically just in regards to Nick Caley play calling, anything to do with that side of things that are concerning to you that you think he can or can't work through?
So the big concern with respect to Nick Caley's ability to call plays, and this is something I went out on Twitter and spoke about. To me, it feels like the difference in the game, the difference in this game today was the Rams' ability to find creative ways to get Puka Nacua the ball and put him in positions to succeed. Whereas the Texans' inability to do the same with Nico Collins. So if you look at the two squads, right? The Rams, yes, they've got Devontae Adams, who I don't think is a washed player like some people would lead you to believe. I think Devontae Adams is still good. But I mean, for the most part, the weapons are comparable, for me. I know Devontae should make that a better receiving core, right? But I have a lot of faith in Higgins and Hutchinson and Noel to be able to be just as good, right? I think those guys have all flashed, and today they flashed as well. I saw some good things from Hutch. I saw some good things from Higgins. I think Noel, not so much in the receiving game, but in the return game, looked good. I think those guys can be good. But where I think the major issue and the ability for the Rams to score touchdowns as opposed to field goals was when they needed to play, when they needed to move the ball, when they needed explosive, they found a way to get Puka Nacua the ball. And on the other side of the football, Nico Collins was very, very held in check. And, we've got high praise for him coming into the game, into the season, one of the top 5 wide receivers in football. Well, they didn't treat him like one, or maybe the Rams did and did a really good job blocking him up. But to me, I feel like that's on the play caller. Sean McVay does a really good job of finding creative ways to get guys the football. He did it forever with Cooper Kupp, and now he's doing it with Puka Nacua. And for the Texans to succeed right now without their full complement of weapons, I think you really have to do that with Nico Collins and to do it.
It felt like early on the Texans kept Puka Nacua in check to an extent. Like looking at his targets and receptions, it doesn't seem that way, but there was plays early on where Nacua was, locked up. And I noticed a change in the way that McVay utilized him. He moved him around until he found a spot where he could get his, best receiver open and get him the ball. And it ended up paying dividends because, like, for example, granted, the Texans defensive play calling on that last, 3rd and 8 was interesting to say the least, because we've spoken to the fact that Jalen Petrie is not the guy I would want one-on-one with the other team's best wide receiver. Coverage is not the biggest strength he has, as much as he is, probably really good in coverage for a linebacker. But McVay putting Nacua in motion, getting him open was huge. And I think that Nick Caley just kind of maybe expected Nico Collins to just he was just like, I'll just run plays and Nico will be open. And there was no, I didn't feel like Nico was really put in a position to succeed. I felt like he was kind of boxed in. And as much as we talk down on Bobby Slowick, Bobby Slowick's usage of Nico Collins, Tank Dell, all those receivers was pretty, 50-50, or, it was pretty direct split on where he would place them. He'd move them around to try and put them in a better spot. And so as much as we talk about Bobby Slowick not making adjustments, it kind of felt like Nico's usage in that scheme immediately gave him the ability to get open. Whereas at least early on, right. And Nick Caley's talked about adjustments and stuff. I would anticipate seeing some over the course of the early parts of the season as he kind of figures it out. You have a weapon in Nico that I think a lot of people that are maybe oversimplifying it view as like, oh, he's like an outside threat. But like most of his production last season was on inward cutting routes, like in the middle. He can make plays all over the field. He has a significant amount of slot usage in his history. So to just box him into, look, Nico's on the outside, and there was points. I mean, I saw Nico go in motion a few times, but it felt very vanilla. It feels very, late preseason with the starters getting their first couple drives where the offense was just kind of like, we're going to hand the ball off 2 times and then run a passing play. And I mean, to his credit, when Nick Caley ran screens, they worked. I didn't see any negative screens, which is a huge improvement relative to last season, where it felt like the Texans leaned on screens to do nothing. They would just throw the ball outside to Nico behind the line of scrimmage for him to struggle to put up another 1 or 2 yards. But I see the point there with that part of play calling, and I think that can progress. I think that's something where we would hope to see Nick Caley look at the film from this game, make adjustments, and get better. And as far as talent goes, here's a question that's kind of I think it's going to be a theme for us. This will be a discussion we have pretty much until either the offensive line figures it out or until they don't. And that is this. Texans Jacob on Twitter is the one who kind of expressed this. Wanted to shout him out for that, but it's something I think we've talked about, and a lot of Texans fans have, at least in the back of their mind, been thinking about, which is that the Texans took an approach this offseason that involved looking at the market for offensive linemen that are proven or offensive linemen that are really good that could be signed and expected to contribute immediately on the interior. And they said, price is too high. Let's go to the bargain bin. And then they said, well, since we're not spending that money / assets on offensive linemen, why don't we grab some quality wide receivers? Because that's also a problem. And so they basically hyper-focused on fixing wide receiver through early picks in the draft. They did take Ariante Ursary, but he is a tackle. And I mean, Ursary had his fair share of struggles. I would put that on him being moved around right before the start. I'd expect that to clear itself up as time goes on if Ed Ingram's healthy. But the interior offensive line wasn't great in this game, I would say. And you got to look at the way the Texans approach this offseason and think to yourself, what is Nick Caserio's doing in as a GM going to be the fact that he's unwilling to spend above, some would say above market value. The guard market has inflated so much that you basically have to, like we were talking about Kevin Zeitler and guys like that, on the free agent market, we watched them sign deals that were far above what they were projected to sign. So the question is Nick Caserio's doing in going to be his handling of the offensive line and his inability to, or his unwillingness to spend the money to get proven talent in there?
I mean, I guess that really depends on what you think of Cole Popovich. A lot of people made all the noise that, hey, this is the guy, the guru, the whisperer. I'm not pointing you out. Maybe you are. I wasn't.
I was pretty high on Cole Popovich going into the season. So
everybody said, like, look, he can take guys that aren't good and make them good. And you famously touted that, Laken Tomlinson and I think it was Ed Ingram were the two guys that had worse PFF grades. Who was it? Was it those two?
They were two of the 3 guys that had worse PFF pass blocking grades than Kenyon Green last season. Green.
And we said, doesn't matter. Cole Popovich is a dude. And then he brought in Andrews, who's his guy. I feel like he's his guy. And so far, I think I would assume well, we don't know, or they haven't said that it was his idea to shuffle the deck with all these different guys, and it didn't look good. Like the offensive line looked as bad as it did last season with respect to protecting CJ Stroud in the pass game. Now they ran the ball great. I mean, they ran the ball for 100 and I think it was 114 yards as a team.
114 yards, but it's important to stipulate that 32 of those yards came from CJ Stroud scrambling.
And I love that. I think that is a new wrinkle that, that may be a CJ thing, that may be a Nick Haley thing, whoever's ideal it is to get CJ more mobile. I think as long as he's smart about protecting himself is a great idea. The fact that he has to live in the pocket continuously, that's not what the NFL is anymore. Now the guys that are able to utilize both, the run game and be conditioned in the pocket are the guys that are killing it. Look no further than the Sunday Night Football game with Josh Allen. And yeah, that was a wild ending.
That was a thriller.
Lamar Jackson. Yeah. So you talk about those guys. Those are some of the best quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks. If he needs to go get 5, 6, 7, 8 yards with his legs, he'll do it. And
I agree with you. The only reason I stipulated that is that when you look at the Texans' designed run plays, they ran for 82 yards, and they had two running backs that averaged 1.7 and 1.0 yards per carry. Whereas Nick Chubb at 13 carries with 60 yards, he averaged approximately 4.5 yards a carry, which is great. Nick Chubb was great. The rest of that running back room laid a big goose egg when it came time to contribute.
Right. And much like we talked about Ariante Ursary, Woody Marks, this was his first day on the job too. And a lot of people think Woody Marks can be somebody later on down the line, especially with respect to him being able to catch the ball out of the backfield more than running it. Dameon Pierce was not good. Dameon Pierce is struggled to a point where it'll be interesting to see what happens with him, especially when and if Joe Mixon comes back this season, because I think he would be the odd man out.
Yeah, well, and ironically enough, Dario Gumbawale, I just looked at, also had 2 carries, and he averaged just like Nick Chubb 4.5 yards a carry. And that's probably not what a lot of people want to hear, because I think a lot of people want to put this game on Dario Gumbawale. And to that I say, if we are putting the whole game on the one play where Dario Gumbawale fumbled it, I have to ask you, should the Texans have put him in a position where that fumble was the difference between winning and losing the game? May I remind you, no touchdowns were scored by the Texans in this game. So, yeah, I mean, I would almost, based on these numbers, I would argue that it should be Nick Chubb with Dario Gumbawale exclusively taking third down back duties and occasionally taking a handoff on second if they want to hand it to him. But that's just maybe a gross overreaction. I still have a lot of hope for Woody Marks. Dameon Pierce's fuse is running a little low, but I mean, I still think this running back room is good. There's just, I think that begs the question of, it goes back to play calling for me. I mean, this team doubled down. They said they want to be a run first team, but the blocking up front was good for Chubb. Chubb was getting it. I think someone at some point was like, we can't keep handing it to Chubb for 3 yards a carry. And I was like, he's getting 4, but okay. But I think that the point still stands. I like your point. I mean, I agree with it. I think every Texans fan you talk to when it comes to CJ Stroud will say, I want to see him get out of take what the defense gives him. And that plays into the fact we'll transition into this discussion. CJ does have a fatal flaw that I think contributed a bit in this game. We saw it where, as much as the O-line, sometimes doesn't give him time, there are times where the O-line gives him the 3-4 seconds that they're required to, and he's still holding the ball, and then the pocket collapses and he takes some pretty bad sacks. So I think that the tendency of CJ, or the new tendency that we're seeing of him to get out of the pocket and take what the defense gives him, could prevent a lot of that. And I kind of was hoping he might have a better sense of when it's time to jump out of the pocket at times. I don't think CJ was any bit the problem. His turnover wasn't even his. That was in Jaden Higgins' hands and stolen by the DB. Incredible play. But what are your thoughts on CJ Stroud and his part in this in terms of maybe holding onto the ball too long? Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, 100%. I think, but and it's funny because like I was getting ready for Sunday football. At 3:00. I'd already watched the first round of games, and then I was on Twitter and somebody tweeted out, year 3 CJ Stroud loading. I just had to stop, and I was like,
it's still loading.
We get so caught up in how good CJ Stroud is to forget that this is his 3rd year in the league as a quarterback, and for all of his success, he's got to be allowed to be a little flawed, right? Like, I mean, it took Lamar and Josh Allen and all those guys a long time to get to the point where it's like, hey, unquestioned. So I part of me wants to do that with CJ, but I don't think it's fair to go, okay, I got to hold these guys to this standard, but CJ, I can only hold you to that standard sometimes. So yes, CJ Stroud needs to get rid of the football, live to fight another day. That's all I would ask. I would be like, look, if it's not there, it's not there. Throw it over somebody's head out of bounds, like so many other great quarterbacks have done, and say, I'll fight from 3rd and 10 as opposed to 3rd and 17. And
3rd and 17 was generous because that was not always the case with some of those sacks.
But I mean, that's part of the maturation of a quarterback. I think any great quarterback would tell you, I made tons of mistakes my first 3-4 years in the league before it started to make sense. Like, hey, I didn't have to do that. And CJ's smart. I think he'll be fine. I wasn't like, I don't look at his numbers and go, wow, CJ, lit it up and the team is just not good. I wonder if, his growing pains with the offense and him having so much more control than he had in the past is a thing. There was some check downs sometimes, like the one to Dameon Pierce. I'm like, that's probably not who you're throwing the football to on the team. Like, there's a bunch of other guys that you can throw the football to. I'm not saying Dameon Pierce can't catch the ball. I'm just saying of the list, it's long that I would rather have coming out of the backfield to catch the ball.
To me, that's a personnel decision. I mean, CJ made the right move. He didn't have any other being there watching it like from the end zone. There wasn't anyone necessarily on the field that I saw that was like, yeah, with the way he was rolling, it was like, okay, yeah, check it down. And then it's like, Pierce is there. Oh, wow. Maybe rethink that.
That's a CJ thing though, that with him having more control and more freedom to do what he needs to do, he's also got to understand his personnel too, right? I just can't.
He does, but like there's a certain amount of automatic. And like, so there was that whole discussion around Anthony Richardson where Anthony Richardson drops back and gets rocked. And the discussion is it a coordinator issue, like a scheme issue that he had a free rusher, or is it by design? And I thought Kurt Warner did a really good job of breaking down that play and showing that like, hey, like Anthony Richardson needs to step through his progressions. He needs to know he's in charge of protections. That was what the O-line was supposed to do. He knew that guy was likely coming unblocked. He needed to hit his check down and he didn't. I watched CJ in this game face the same situation. I watched the Rams linebacker come off the edge unblocked and CJ hit his check down very systematically. So that part I understand. Like, he was on the field and he did what he was supposed to do. Now, if he's in that situation and the check down is Dameon Pierce, is it his fault that the play was designed in a way where he could be put in a situation where the expectation is, yeah, check it down? It's like, to me, that's coaching. And I felt like, as much as they talked about Nick Chubb being the bell cow, I was very interested to see how it was very much a committee in that backfield. The usage did not match what was reported. And so that once again falls back on coaching. I don't think that's on CJ to look in the huddle. Oh, it's Dameon. I know I can't check it down this play. I'll just have to take the sack. I don't know, or I'll just have to throw it away. Like, I think that as a quarterback, there's to some extent a way that you're wired to run. And if there's, I would look to teams that suck. I would look to teams as we're familiar with.
I will not.
Rooted for a Texans team that has not been good. Sometimes the talent on the team is just so restrictive that you will have to throw a pass to someone that you are not confident is going to be able to catch the ball. That's just that's the unfortunate truth for some quarterbacks in the league, at the college level, at any level. And as much as it shouldn't be a thing in the NFL, and especially on a team that's trying to contend for a Super Bowl, there shouldn't be a situation where CJ has to look and go, okay, let her rip. Let's see if this works. But that's a personnel issue. And I think that 100% Ogunbowale, anyone else should have been on the field for that play if that was going to be an expected outcome.
To be fair, I believe that in years past, where CJ did not have the freedom to check out of a play into another play and do all of those things, which he now has, I would agree with you. Now, if I look over and I see my defense is lined up a certain way, and I know I got Dameon Pierce behind me, I'll just check to another play and then make it to where I'm not checking down to Dameon Pierce. Hell, I'd rather him just hand the ball off to him, check to a running play, and try that than trying to throw it to him out of the backfield when you know that's not what his strong suit is. You know what I mean? And I feel like CJ, as the time will go on, will grow into that, right? But I can't always say, hey, we want to give him all the keys. We want him to run it, and then go, well, he didn't run it good. That's the coach's fault. I mean, he's got to be able to know that too.
Like I said, I mean, that I don't know. I couldn't look at that and be like, CJ, what are you doing there?
And I'm not mad at him for the play. I think he made the right play. But I also think the maturity will be, okay, next time I'm checking into something else so I don't have to throw it to him because he doesn't catch the ball well.
I mean, okay, yeah, I see on that. But outside that, and I mean, to close out the CJ Stroud discussion, I think that one of the things that's really helped out his, how do you put it? Him hanging onto the ball as long as he does has never been a problem until I'd say about halfway through last season, because the Texans would do that thing where CJ would get sacked and it would be 2nd and 25. And then CJ would drop back and it'd be a 26-yard pass to Nico Collins or something that made it a very manageable 3rd down, or converted the downs. And so more times than not, whenever he put the team in that situation, he dug them out of it. And it's really hard to be mad at someone for doing that when they fix the problem right away. But what has now become an issue is that CJ will hang on to the ball. The Texans will go into a 2nd and 26, and then they will hand the ball off to their running back or give CJ another opportunity, and they will come up with a 2nd and 17, a 2nd and 15, or a 3rd and 15, sorry, 3rd and 16 or whatever. And now okay, what are the odds? I think there was one play where they lined up for a 3rd and 23, and I was thinking to myself, if there's ever a team to convert a 3rd and 23, it's the team that converted the only 4th and 20 of 2022 in order to get CJ Stroud. I mean, so sure, but you don't want to constantly be doing that. And it felt that, I would say, if there's one issue that persists so far that I need to see fixed, that is something that was a constant problem last year and remains, at least to some extent, a problem this year, this playing behind the chains by a long shot and expecting CJ to just drop back and you're not. So to recap our discussion, just to kind of bring it all together, you're not putting Nico Collins in a position to succeed, and then you're dropping CJ back and it's 3rd and 23 and you're just like, okay, CJ, save us. And you want CJ to just be able to do that. And I think his rookie season was that. But just a question that came up on Twitter relative to that is do you think that the Texans will be chasing CJ's rookie season? So like, CJ had a really good rookie season, and now it seems like all of our discussions are circular back to looking at what he was his rookie season and how he's not being that this season. And is that just going to be a continual thing? Do you think that it more falls on scheme, coordinator, talent, any number of other issues? I feel like I personally have stood at the forefront of finding everything else that's wrong with this Texans offense besides CJ. But there was a point in the middle of last season where I had to go, okay, let's look at what CJ is doing, because there's something to it. Do you think that's the case? Do we like my concern, and the reason I asked the question, I saw it from Dr. Barrett on Twitter, but the main reason I bring the question up is because one of my concerns that's been creeping in pretty much since the middle of last season is that because of the way the Texans have handled the offensive line, the way they've set up CJ, and the beatings that he's kind of taken, that maybe the Texans have broken him beyond repair. And I think we're a little early in that thought process, and I'm probably too optimistic of a person to be the one to bring up that discussion. But for the sake of discussion, I'm bringing it up now so that we can say 6 months from now that we had this discussion. But how do you feel about that thought process? Is it just way too early to be having that? Like, I don't know.
I mean, I feel like the people that want to have that conversation still have PTSD from, David Carr. And it was the exact same scenario. The dude showed up. It was supposed to be the guy, and all he did was get sacked all the time, to the point where, he was never the guy. He was never the dude they drafted, and just a shell of himself, right? I don't think that CJ Stroud is so bothered by, what's going on, that mentally he is going to just struggle to be, successful. I think that when you look at this team, he's dealing with a lot of turnover, and everybody just assumes that nothing comes from that. Like, okay, I got a new offensive coordinator. I got a new O-line coach. I've got now I've got power to affect plays where I didn't have it before, and just immediately assume, oh, well, he should hit the ground running. It should be fine. And I think we feel that way about Caley. We feel that way about Cole Popovich. Those guys should just not have any growing pains, to speak to one of your talking points, and just roll with it. And for me, I think that's why I preach patience in the preseason. That's why I preach patience going into this game. Like, I knew that there was going to be some struggle. If you didn't, you haven't been watching enough football, because anybody that's been in a similar scenario has had similar struggles. Kyler Murray was a monster, and then Kyler Murray wasn't a monster, and now Kyler Murray can be a monster. I mean, Joe Burrow had a rough day at the office today. Are we out on Joe Burrow? Are
we out on Jamar Chase?
Yeah, are we out on Jamar Chase? There's fantasy owners that he lost them week 1. I promise you that. It's part of the league, and part of turning over and stuff like that. I go back to Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, because those guys took years to be every bit of what, everyone thought they were going to be. Now, did they flash? Absolutely. Did they succeed right away? No. Does that mean CJ won't? I don't think so. I think CJ showed you today, like there was plays he made with his feet that I was like, man, you get CJ like that, where he's burning you for 10, 15-yard chunks, a la, Herbert, Mahomes, and all these other guys. And now you got to be honest. He's going to keep you honest. I think CJ, as time goes along, will get better. And I think maybe by the end of this year, maybe, next year, whatever, you're going to get that dude plus some. And we're going to be talking about, remember that episode where we were questioning if CJ Stroud could be, that guy? And it's like, he just threw for 5,000 yards and 45 touchdowns or something crazy. Just throw all the numbers up there you want. I think he can do it, but I think you got to give him time to grow into what this new is.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that that's at the end of the day, it kind of encapsulates the point that I'll probably be trying to make at least for the next 4 or 5 weeks, until it's time to form an informed opinion on what this team is this year. Which is, this is a team that is installing a new system, with a new offensive coordinator who's never called plays before. There's going to be some trial and error and some learning. This team is talented enough to make a dent, but the question is, will they be able to get it together, get that chemistry together, and make it shake? So one last thing to talk about is obviously the defense. While they did hold the Rams to 14 points, I kind of felt like at times broke down. Some of it could be blamed on, the concept that I always talk about with the atrophy of defense as the game goes on. If the offense is not, producing at a high level, your defense is going to be out there more. And they will run into those problems. I think I turned to someone in the middle of the game and I like early in the game. And I said, this Texans offense is going to have to keep the ball and keep this Rams defense on the field and tire them out. Cause otherwise they're just going to run all over them. And then we're not gonna be able to get anything done. But looking at this, one thing that stood out to me is the secondary. There's some questions around that. Do you think the secondary is the biggest concern from the defense? Do you think there are any serious concerns with the defense through this week 1 performance, or is it all rainbows and butterflies?
Oh no, the secondary is a huge concern. That for me, when I spoke earlier about the systemic issues that I think plagued the Texans, that I don't know if they can overcome because of who they are. Their head coach, DeMeco Ryans, has been asked multiple times, will you shadow guys with Derek Stingley Jr.? And multiple times he said, well, if we have to, we will, but we don't like to. We don't want to do that. We don't want to change who we are, and we just want to go our best versus their best. Well, today, I especially felt like that reared its ugly head, because everywhere that Puka Nacua went should have been accompanied by one of Kamari Lassiter or Derek Stingley Jr. Now, to be fair, I think that, the rumors of Devontae Adams' demise are untrue. Devontae Adams still got game. He can still ball. So I understand, okay, we're gonna put Derek Stingley on Devontae Adams, and we're gonna try to neutralize that there. But the fact that Puka Nacua was allowed to move all over the formation, and a lot of the times ended up finding Jalen Petrie, was just a mistake. You can't say I'm putting Jalen Petrie in a position to be successful when you're asking him to cover someone like Puka Nacua out in space. It's wrong. And for me, I think this goes all the way up to the top. I believe this is a DeMeco Ryans thing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'll change, and it won't be because of him, because he's trying to step away from it. And Matt Burke will go, okay, nope, we're going to start shadowing more, because I think they should, because the front is phenomenal. And if you give them the opportunity, because obviously the synergy's there, right? You have to be able to guard these guys for a couple seconds, to give those guys a couple seconds to get to the quarterback. They're going to do it. There was a huge part in this game where it was like everything was in front of Matt Stafford. It was just, he was totally bottled up because the front was doing so good. It was only later on when Puka got loose a few times, and I think his name was Xavier Smith. He got loose once, and it's just like, you have to be better about going, okay, we're going to let Tutu Atwell beat you, or we're going to let, insert whatever tight end. And they didn't do that. And you look at the box score, Puka Nacua had 10 catches for 130 yards. I mean, that can't happen.
I mean, I agree with you on that. I look to the example that the Rams defense set, where their front seven is so good. I couldn't name for you but one or two of their secondary players, but I mean, the Texans didn't score a touchdown. There wasn't really a breakout wide receiver. It was all held in check because their front seven got in there. And as good as the front seven played, they did get home a few times later in the game. There was a lot of times early where I think we're still in that pressures versus actually getting home and getting a sack kind of phase, and how that affects it. But I mean, at the end of the day, when we're talking about the secondary, this unwillingness to adjust, this unwillingness to put Derek Stingley where he needs to be. One, it probably could have helped on the play where he got hurt, because I'm pretty sure he was covering like a no-name receiver on that play. And to speak to Devontae Adams, like, I agree with you. I mean, as much as he, people will talk about his lack of production or a couple of drops early on, he was cooking Derek Stingley in the later part of the game. I would argue that Derek Stingley may not have, it doesn't seem like he was fully 100% there. A lot of his game involves baiting letting guys get in front of him and getting back. And I think that there might be some sort of a hip or a lingering issue. He'll probably feel that hit for a very long time after today. It was very brutal to see, to witness in person. I'm surprised Devontae Adams, got up as quickly as he did with as brutal as the hit was. But this secondary is also facing what I think is the reality of Kalen Bullock, like I spoke to, needs to have a breakout season. And people are saying, well, he's already arrived. He had a really good rookie season. I mean, so did Jalen Petrie, and the year after was a little rough. And I think we saw some bad lines from Kalen Bullock. That whole safety room and really the secondary in general just seemed like they were caught out of position a few times especially as the game went on. It felt like it was more recurring. So it's good that they only allowed 14 points. It felt like they probably should have allowed more. Just looking at it, like a lot, watching the progression of the game, and like I said, some of this is on the offense for putting them in a bad spot. But as the game went on, I was watching Stafford drop back, and I was like, I don't know if he's not going to complete this pass. Like, I think he's probably going to. It's just a matter of like, can the pass rush get home to stop him? So I think there's some work to be done. I'm not throwing it all out just yet, but like I think that if we're looking at it, sure, you could look at the linebacker room and have your qualms with it, but I felt like they were pretty good. The front seven in general was not super concerning to me. But I look at the secondary, and even CJ Gardner-Johnson just did not have his best game. And it makes you wonder if he is legitimately fully back, or if they needed him to be back because they don't like the answer. If he's not on the field, he was just like, well, I'm good to go, so put me out there. And I feel like D'Amico is probably more likely to do that with his defensive players as opposed to offense, because he's just kind of, as a player coach, look a guy in the eyes and be like, you ready? Are you ready to go? Okay, I'll put you in there. I know I feel like to some extent they've handled injuries on both sides of the ball pretty consistently, but I would believe it if they really felt like they needed a guy on defense, and D'Amico, thought he passed the vibe check, that he might put him out there. But I think the main problem is the offense. Once the offense gets right, I think a lot of the defensive issues go away. We just don't really have to talk about them until the offense, causes them to be a thing. Feels like to me. I don't know. Is that a valid train of thought?
Sort of. I mean, I really feel like when you look at like Sean McVay, that's his calling card, right? He's a really good schemer of offense, and as much as you want to look at the secondary and go, well, they didn't play well. I mean, Matt Stafford was 21 of 29 for 245. Like, I feel like that's a really good number. Like, you look at some of the other numbers that got put up there and from some of the quarterbacks, and, a lesser defense, Stafford probably cooks them for 350. I thought the tackling was really good. If they got beat, it was like, okay, you get no more. There wasn't a ton of yak for me. I really feel like these are problems where, like, nitpicking. The thing with Puka is like, for me, the one issue that I feel like separated them from being able to win this game. They probably hold the Rams to 7 points if Puka's not extending drives. And then in that fateful play at the end of the game, you probably give CJ a chance with decent field position and 45 seconds left if you just find a way to stop Puka Nacua, and they can't. So,
yeah, I mean, we spoke to that earlier. Like, the ending up with Jalen Petrie trailing Puka Nacua on that drive, I think very evidently they thought that the Rams were just going to run the ball and try and run the clock. and that was not the case. And I suspected they were probably going to drop back on that third down. What do they stand to lose from if the ball ends up on the ground, or if he's short? I didn't see very much. What's one timeout going to do? I mean, it could be the difference, but I never took Sean McVay or that Rams team to play super conservatively for the sake of it. So
I was surprised. They threw it. I think conventional wisdom tells you run that ball, you make that team use their last time out. Sean McVay went for the throat, because if they miss it, now you're stopping the clock for them, and now you're giving them field position and a timeout to work with.
Yeah, I just feel like I have a list of coaches in my head that I'm like, this guy will take the risk when it comes down to it. And like I, on my list of coaches, like coaches that will go for it on 3rd and 8 and like throw the ball, McVay's one of the ones in my head that I'm like, yeah, that guy would do it. So I felt like they may have played it wrong from that perspective. But oh well. On that note, I'm ready to put this loss behind us and move on to bigger and better things. Monday Night Football with the Buccaneers in Houston, a whiteout to start the season, to start the home stretch of the season, I guess. But do you have any final thoughts before we bring this thing to a close, Tom?
Yeah. I'm glad they get an extra day. Monday night's going to be a huge one. They really don't want to start 0-2, given that, both the Colts and the Jags found ways to win. They beat bad football teams, so I'm not going to put a ton of stock in, how they won. But, you need to be able to be with them in the standings before you play them, so you're not chasing. And you definitely don't want to start the season 0-2. There's a stat that says if you start 0-2, only so many teams make the playoffs, and it's not a good number. So hoping that they come out and do what they're supposed to do against Tampa.
I couldn't agree more. I think until the end of the season, I will bring this up. I brought it up once before. The Texans have never won the division. They've never made the playoffs 3 years in a row. Both of those things have never happened. And so could be a big step, but we're not off to a good first step to that step. So I'm cautiously optimistic still. That's kind of where I'm at, and I'm ready to see how they look on Monday Night Football. A test that's a little less testy. I wouldn't say it's like going from number 3 Ohio State to San Jose State, but I'd say that's definitely a step in a more manageable direction in terms of competition. I'm hoping for a game kind of like 2023 against the Buccaneers. That's still one of my favorite games that I've ever seen. There's something with a little more scoring, a little more flashy shootout style. That's what I like. I'm not saying it has to be that close.
I was about to say
a little more back and forth, a little more action.
I got you.
So on that note, thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Bullpen. As always, I've been James Roy. You can find me at James Roy NFL on all social media. Tom is TCTom1 on Instagram and Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we together make up the Bullpen, the number one veteran-owned Texans podcast in the whole world. As far as we know, no official stats on that. It's just a guess out loud from me. So thank you for supporting your troops and your Texans. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.
Take the handoff. Stroud looking.